Well, one of the most wanted terrorists in the world is now dead after the U.S. killed him in a drone strike over the weekend. Ayman al-Zawahiri was a key mastermind behind the 9/11 attacks. He's been running al-Qaeda since Osama bin Laden was killed. Senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge has more on how the U.S. finally tracked him down in Kabul after all these years.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Up until a few months ago, the al-Qaeda leader's location was a huge mystery for U.S. intelligence, even with a $25 million bounty on his head. Now with this drone strike, senior al-Qaeda leadership behind 9/11 is dead or captured.
Justice has been delivered, and this terrorist leader is no more.
President Biden approved the precision strike that killed al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri. 2 Hellfire missiles from a U.S. drone killed al-Zawahiri on the balcony of his hideout in downtown Kabul in Afghanistan.
And the mission was a success. None of his family members were hurt, and there were no civilian casualties.
The terrorist leader was tracked down earlier this year in the busy Afghan capital of Kabul, where he moved to reunite with family.
I gave the final approval to go get him.
Mr. Biden said the successful operation could help close a final chapter of the 9/11 attacks, which killed nearly 3,000 Americans 21 years ago next month. Al-Zawahiri was pivotal to planning the attack.
It's my hope that this decisive action will bring one more measure of closure.
Al-Zawahiri also played a role in al-Qaeda attacks that murdered Americans overseas at 2 U.S. embassies in East Africa and on the USS Cole in Yemen. After Navy SEALs raided this compound in Pakistan 11 years ago, killing al-Qaeda founder Osama bin Laden, Al-Zawahiri took over, and for years, rumors about his death swirled, his location unknown. After last year's chaotic withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan, Mr. Biden insisted the weekend strike shows the U.S. ability to target terrorists remains strong.
No matter how long it takes, no matter where you hide, if you are a threat to our people, the United States will find you and take you out.
A former senior U.S. military official who ran counterterrorism operations told CBS News the question now is how the al-Qaeda leader lived in the Afghan capital without the support of the Taliban, indicating that this relationship between al-Qaeda and the Taliban is as strong as ever. Anne-Marie.
Catherine, thank you very much. So we're going to continue this conversation. We want to bring in Mark Jacobson. He is an assistant dean for Washington programs in Syracuse at Syracuse University's Maxwell School, and he's a former deputy NATO Afghanistan advisor. We got the right person to talk about this. So you probably just heard what Catherine had to say about the fact that al-Zawahiri was living in downtown Kabul. He couldn't have been there and been living there semi-openly. I mean, the reports are he was on a balcony without the help of the Taliban. What does that say about the relationship between al-Qaeda and the Taliban?
Part of the assumptions of the Biden administration during the withdrawal from Afghanistan was that that al-Qaeda and other groups, ISIL, for example, wouldn't pose a threat to the United States. Part of that is the degree to which the Taliban were allowing these groups to take residence without any repercussions. And it's no surprise to most people who've been watching the situation for 2 decades now, that the Taliban allowed someone like Zawahiri to stay. Of course, that's not a problem anymore, but the question is, who else? How much will al-Qaeda be able to grow in an Afghanistan that is essentially ungoverned now, and to the degree there is someone in control, someone who has been in the past friendly towards al-Qaeda?
When the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan, so did a lot of aid and support. I don't know if there's anything sort of left to take away from the Taliban, but could something like this, could the U.S., perhaps take action against the Taliban because of something like this?
I think it's highly unlikely that the Biden administration would escalate any sort of conflict and punish the Taliban. I mean, this was essentially the justification for 9/11 or after 9/11. The idea being that al-Qaeda launched these attacks, the Taliban would not continue to give them safe harbor, and therefore we took down the Taliban regime. I don't see the Biden administration wanting to widen the war in any case. Their view is that the drone strikes, the over-the-horizon strikes, are sufficient to keep America safe.
So now I want to go back to what you mentioned in your first answer there. This withdrawal from Afghanistan, which was certainly chaotic, and the argument was that al-Qaeda has been wiped out. Clearly, that's not the case. I'm wondering now, sort of a year on, what is the general consensus from experts in this region, like yourself, about the withdrawal from Afghanistan and whether or not it should have happened at all?
Well, I think there's a split here. There's a consensus that the withdrawal was handled poorly. I mean, it was an abysmal failure, and I think this is something the Biden administration has to grapple with as we come upon the one-year anniversary of that withdrawal. There's a split, though, as to whether or not there should have been a withdrawal. Remember, this goes back to the Trump administration, which makes the decision to end American involvement in the war. The Biden administration had a little bit of maneuver room to say, well, we're not going to stand by what the Trump administration did. But at the same time, it was split. The Biden administration and many experts, people with decades of experience in Afghanistan, felt it was time to end the war. The Afghans weren't pulling their weight, or at least the Afghan government. The problem is on the other side that there were tens of thousands of Afghans who served side by side with Americans and NATO allies to try and defeat the Taliban, and they were left. And I think this doesn't sit well with many people. And I also think it's hard to separate the way the withdrawal was done from the decision to withdraw. They're part of the same policy decision.
Yeah, indeed. Mark, thank you very much.